President Obama's re-election campaign has launched a new website called Attack Watch. The slogan is "Get the facts, fight the smears." Your reaction? I mean, I know the conservatives on Twitter and the YouTube are having a field day with this, making a mockery of it, but your reaction when you first heard this?
Well, it's a very oversimplistic way of looking at the world, and the way they treat the things they talk about is almost like it's from a comic book. But I think there's a more disturbing aspect to it, and that is, we've heard for years from President Obama about the need to restore civility in our political discourse, and yet he's got a website called Attack Watch that is more of an attack on the people who are making comments than the comments themselves. And it really is a kind of Chicago-style politics of how you treat your adversaries. I think it's going to backfire on him. I think it's another sign of the president's desperateness as he looks towards 2012, and I think this is going to be have a negative outcome for him.
Oh, I think it already has, and I think it has backfired for sure. But it's interesting because when I was looking at it, you and the UN Arms Trade Treaty are one of the targets of the quote-unquote Obama hit squad. They call it a gun control gossip that you and other public officials are making outlandish claims that President Obama is planning to use the UN treaty, the Arms Trade Treaty, to take away firearms from law-abiding gun owners.
Well, the whole basis of their argument is on a media outlet called Fact Checker that looks at some of the things said about the Arms Trade Treaty, and it's so filled with errors that I would be embarrassed to have anything to do with it. But the whole point of calling attention to the Arms Trade Treaty has been, from my point of view, to prevent President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton from negotiating us into an untenable position that it would be very hard to get out of. And I think it's precisely because we've called attention to the risks of this treaty that's been in process for a long time. It goes back to the Clinton administration originally, that we've been able to stop their agenda. And I think the viciousness of this Attack Watch website shows how frustrated they are that they haven't been able to sneak this one by advocates of the Second Amendment.
And I think you used a word that I thought was good, desperation overall, when you look at what this president is doing as he heads into the re-election campaign. But one thing they don't talk about, and it's what you've talked about for a long time, about how he is a post-American president. And they don't talk about how he has said he thinks the UN should have more say over the way we do business in the U.S. overall.
No, exactly. And I think it's they've picked something that obviously has stung them very badly. So I'm really quite honored to be one of those singled out by them. Maybe I should send them some other things I've written, and they can put those up too. But this is the sort of response I think that's going to turn people off to the president, and he's already in enough trouble with his economic policies that I don't see what the just basically the political wisdom is from their point of view in thinking that this somehow is going to benefit them. I think it reminds people who are concerned about the Second Amendment that there are a range of threats to it. Some come in our domestic debates at the state or federal level, but there's some at the international level, too.
Well, John, you talked about how the president's in trouble. I mean, you look at this president, his problems haven't come from the smears or the rumors that he claims are out there. This is a White House that they can't take responsibility for anything, and they're involved in one cover-up after another. They didn't know about ATF's gun-walking scandal, Operation Fast and Furious. Now they're trying to back away from this loan scandal with Solinda, a solar panel company.
Well, you raise Fast and Furious, and I think this is a very important point. The congressional investigators still have not been able to get to the bottom of it. The Justice Department is stonewalling. The Attorney General says he never heard of it. I find that hard to believe. I think that really is a condemnation of the Attorney General. He doesn't know what's going on in his own department in a major operation that involves a foreign country. And let's be clear, I think the hidden agenda of Operation Fast and Furious was to try and provide evidence for the false administration claim that the drug wars in Mexico are fueled by the illegal importation of guns that are bought openly in America. It was their whole effort was to lay a predicate for stricter gun controls in the United States. And the fact is it got out of their control. and showed exactly the opposite, that it's really the absence of law and order increasingly on the Mexican side that really endangers us in the United States. So not only did they not advance their gun control agenda, I think they showed just how inept and how dangerous the war on drugs that we see on the Mexican side is getting for us over here.
Yeah, and Congressman Issa himself called Attorney General a dangerous guy.
Well, again, I come back to this point. Here was an operation involving a foreign country, and these are some of the most delicate things an Attorney General has to decide, to worry about the foreign implications of our own law enforcement efforts. And I know Attorney Generals I've served under, Ed Meese, Dick Thornburgh, and many other Attorney Generals of both parties, would be appalled if they thought something like this was going on in their department and they were not aware of it. And so I come to the conclusion he either had to know about it, in which case Congress needs to do more investigating to bring that out, or he's just not competent managing the department. And obviously neither one is a conclusion you want to come to about the country's top law enforcement officer.
And John, when you look at Operation Fast and Furious, I mean, do you also see this as a national security issue?
Absolutely, absolutely, because here you have in the actions of the drug cartels in Mexico something that poses a very direct threat to the United States. About a year ago now, Secretary of State Clinton said that looking at the breakdown of order and civil society in Mexico reminded her of the success of the drug cartels in Colombia 25 years ago. And, she's absolutely right. I don't often agree with her, but she put her finger on something there. Within a few days after she said that, President Obama said, "It doesn't remind me of Colombia 20 years ago." And I think that shows the kind of blindness to threats on our border. This is not some hypothetical threat a long way away. It's on our border. The violence spilling into American cities, the distribution of drugs. President's just not paying attention. Neither is his Attorney General.
Yep, and we're seeing the cartels showing up in small towns across the country, no longer just along the border states, too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be all through the country, because the distribution of drugs inside the U.S. is through gangs in urban areas and our own criminal networks that we should be doing more about. And it's just strengthening them when they're tied into the Mexican drug cartels.
And I know you recently announced you weren't going to run for president. But I also know that this whole issue of national security is so important to you and a big concern of yours, because it's really not a hot-button issue right now among the candidates on the campaign.
No, I think it should be. That's really why I looked at running for president
Right.
to begin with. I'm not going to give up on that. I still think it's important to focus on it, and I'm looking for ways to do that, because our adversaries around the world, whether they're drug cartels or nuclear weapons proliferators or terrorists, are not going to have the politeness to wait for us to get our economic house in order. A president's got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, and that's what we need to see from the prospective candidates. Can they handle our economic recovery, which we desperately need, and can they protect us internationally?
Well, you don't hear the media talking much about Operation Fast and Furious. And I was wondering, if you don't have the Republicans making an issue of this and talking about what's at stake for our country if we have Obama in the White House for 4 more years, does this work to his advantage? I mean, it's like it's what he wants, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The less people talk about these kinds of issues, and Fast and Furious is an excellent example, the less they focus on the failures that are going to cost us down the road. You may not see the negative consequences today, but we sure will in the near future.